Why? Why did you have to go and do that? Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today. And for this video, we are going to be talking about my biggest disappointments and surprises for the year. All right, before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments, what is one book that really just knocked your socks off? Absolutely shocked you. You were flabbergasted at how much you enjoyed it. Let's talk about it. Add to my TBR. As per usual, I like to get the negatives out of the way first. The only real organization I have of these books is chronologically from when I read them throughout the year, so it's not like I'm talking about the most disappointing to the least or least to most. Also, just because a book was disappointing to me doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad book. It usually just means it didn't really fulfill what I went in expecting. It didn't give me what I wanted. On that note, let's dive right in. For the first book, I have to say The Silence of Girls by Pat Barker. This was a book that I picked up for my Greek retellings 5x5 earlier this year. My biggest problem with this book is the fact that it's called The Silence of the Girls. You know, the focus of the story is supposed to be on the women in the Trojan War, the ones whose pain often gets overlooked in the original myths. That's what I like about feminist Greek retellings. This book actually ends up spending the entire time talking about the pain these women are going through caused by the men. I genuinely don't believe this book actually passed the Bechdel test because it was constantly just talking about the men they left, the men they loved, the men who have abandoned them, the men who are abusing them. And then it was worsened by the fact that at the end of the book, Pat Barker essentially told me I was dumb for expecting this book to be about anything else, because obviously women's pain is always going to be at the forefront of these sort of stories, and really they don't actually matter. The focus is still on the men. The whole marketing around this book is to tell the story of the women. Yeah, this one was a serious letdown, and genuinely every time I think about it, it kind of aggravates me all over again. This is one scenario where I will say this was a disappointment and a bad book. I said it. I'm sticking with that. Next was a book that I thought rounded out a series, but apparently the series might actually continue. Well Traveled by Jen DeLuca is the fourth in the Well Met series. For the rest of the series, my enjoyment had actually been going up. I liked the first book. I fairly liked the second. The third book I really, really enjoyed. So by the fourth, I thought this was gonna be a 5-star. I thought I was gonna love it. And I didn't. Fortunately, this felt less like a romance book and more like a women's fiction. The female main character is really just trying to figure out a new life for herself, a new happiness. She spent so much of her experience trying to please everybody around her, trying to be this perfect lawyer, the most successful person everybody knows, but that doesn't actually make her happy. Working at this Renaissance fair as a organizer for a bunch of oh my God, what's the term? Palm readers and like tarot card readers. That's what she finds joy in. And also, you know, the really sexy, hunky Irishman who's the leader of his band. But really, the romance in this one just felt very underdeveloped. I didn't understand why they had such strong feelings for each other. At the scene where they're confessing their love, I hadn't experienced the things they're telling me I'm supposed to have within the book. I just felt like they were kind of friends and, you know, they sort of flirted, but somehow that equaled out to love. I'm not really sure. This one was a letdown, as I said, but apparently a 5th book will be coming out in the series, so fingers crossed, hopefully that one will go better. Another romance book that this one was disappointing because I really loved the first book in the series, and I really loved the main character of this one in that prior book. Yours Truly by 𝗖cie Jimenez, which is technically a second book in the same universe as Part of Your World, where we're following the best friend Brianna. I really loved her in the first book. I thought she was so much fun. She had such personality, but once we were actually in her head, I got really aggravated by her. And then the love interest character in Yours Truly, Jacob, I adored. I loved him. He was so sweet. He was so caring. His anxiety very much paired up with the kind of anxiety I experienced. The way he really showcased his feelings to her by writing letters, how they connected with one another was so sweet, so pure. And then 𝗖cie Jimenez made it so that the entire book, these two just would not talk about their real feelings for one another. And it was so aggravating. The way Jimenez handles miscommunication just drives me up a wall. I've come to realize this. She and I have officially broken up because of it. But also, The utilization of a trope at the very end that I am not a fan of really made this such a letdown. But no, apparently Part of Your World is just gonna be the one-off for me when it comes to this author, and I'm still sad about that, but I'll have to deal. Did not realize when I was sorting these out that like all of these are romance right together. For You and No One Else by Ronnie Lauren, another final book in a romance book series. This one was a letdown, especially because Yes and I Love You, the first of the series, was on my best books of last year. I adored that book. I still think about that book. I really have actually been wanting to kind of reread it lately. I didn't really get swept away with their romance quite as much. This kind of does like a friends to lovers slash friends with benefits slash kind of fake dating thing. The big thing that makes it hurt so much is the hero character in this, Beck, personality-wise, is just like my boyfriend. He is exactly like Josh, even down to like how he's described as dressing, the job he has, his hobbies, drinks he likes, food he enjoys, all of that stuff perfectly matched with Josh to a scary degree. Literally the only thing they didn't have in common was Beck is commented as wearing a Beastie Boys shirt and Josh does not like the Beastie Boys. And then also he has a lot of religious trauma, which I can say Josh does not have. In the end, although I liked this book, it just didn't quite live up to the adoration I had for the two prior books. Those two were 5 stars, whereas this was like 3.5. I'm keeping it on my shelves because I did enjoy it. I did annotate it as I was going through, and I had a lot of fun picking up on all the similarities between Beck and my own significant other. It just was a sad note to end on in the series. Apparently, I'm just not gonna stop talking about series because, you know, it hurts all the more when you've come to care about the characters. You really enjoy the plot. But, you know, when the later books are a letdown, it hurts so much. And I'm talking about 9 Liars by Maureen Johnson, which I feel like it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody if you've spent a little bit of time on my channel, because anytime I would talk about this book lately, it's about how it let me down. I loved the Truly Devious series when I read it for the first time in college. Adored it. It was so much fun. I really fell in love with the characters, the friend group, the dynamics between all of them, as well as the mystery. It's a roller coaster ride. And yes, it's stretched out into 3 books, but I was sucked in the entire time. The 4th book, Box in the Woods, I really liked that one. It is a standalone. It has a very campy horror movie feel at times, and I still was enjoying the characters, though I was starting to get a bit tired of the relationship our main character has. And in this one, it just like took everything I loved in the friendship group and soured it, made me so aggravated with every single character. There's just constant interpersonal drama going on in this between Stevie and her boyfriend, Stevie and her best friends, Stevie and her parents, Stevie and her boyfriend's friend. Like, it was too much. Then the mystery itself actually was a letdown for me in this one. I both guessed it, but also was very unimpressed by that answer. When Stevie unveils everything, explains to us why and how she came to this realization, came to this answer, all of that evidence is super thin. It would not stand up in court. The book ends acknowledging that, but it just makes it so that solving the mystery wasn't really satisfying. I'm still so bitter about this one. I'm actually getting rid of it. I still don't know if I'm gonna continue on the series, which again hurts me because I loved the first 4 books. Why? Why did you have to go and do that? Next is one that I hope won't get me any hate because I wanted to like this book. I really did. Cozy Fantasies. I've had fairly positive experience with them so far, but unfortunately Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree just did not work for me. High fantasy world with low stakes sounded fantastic, but apparently I needed a little bit higher stakes. Also just felt like I really needed to care about the main character in this one so much more. I actually ended up reading the prequel of this book as well, and I still didn't feel particularly strong about the main character. So I think perhaps Baldree's character work and I just don't particularly get along. And since both of these books are mostly focused on vibes and characters, naturally we didn't really get along super well. This book was really cute. It was fine. It gave me exactly what was on the 10. It just wasn't the 5-star I was anticipating, and I'm still bummed about it. I wanted to love this book, okay, but I just didn't. I wouldn't necessarily say I wanted to love this book, but I really, really wanted to love this author. Jennifer Hillier's Things We Do in the Dark. This is actually the first of her work that I have read, and unfortunately, like, it wasn't a letdown, but this book splits between two separate mysteries, and it felt as though that the author was putting a lot more focus on the mystery that I didn't really care about. I had put together what happened there. I wasn't interested anymore. I wanted this one that was happening in the future timeline. That intrigued me. I wanted to know what was going on there. But it wraps up super quickly, and it made me realize how much the book had been dragging to get there. I still have many of Hillier's other books on my TBR. I know I have Jar of Hearts on there. I think I have The Butcher on my TBR as well. So hopefully one of those will work better for me, and perhaps this might not have been the best book to start with. Fingers crossed that's what it is, and that in reality, Jennifer Hillier and I will get on quite well, but we'll see. And then the final one for my disappointments, thankfully, was Little Weirds by Jenny Slate. I adore Jenny Slate. I think she is such a fun actress. Everything I've ever seen her in, I just love her character. She's chaotic, she's weird, she's strange, she owns it perfectly. And this book does match her. It does. It's sort of a memoir, but it's like abstract art, magical realism. This was a really strange read. What's very surprising with that is the fact that it's purple prose. It's super flowery. It's very beautiful. And usually that fits with me perfect. But when it's hitting the point that I'm having a really hard time following what the author is actually trying to say, what the real meaning of the sentence is, then it doesn't work anymore. And that happened here. For being just over 200 pages, I actually read this fairly slow because I was really having to focus to figure out what Slate was saying, to understand the message she was trying to convey. There was one specific essay in this that I did really like, and I thought that one was very simple but beautifully done, and I really liked the idea underlying it. The rest of this felt like a fever dream. Yeah, still bummed that I didn't love this more, especially because this cover is so much fun. Okay, so on the opposite side, we're gonna talk about my surprises for the year. And first, I have to mention Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones, because I initially was not planning on continuing this series. This is the second book from My Heart is a Chainsaw, or is it Angel Lake Trilogy? I think is what the series itself is called. However, I saw Stephen Graham Jones's name and a musical reference title on NetGalley and ended up requesting this. Thankfully, I had read My Heart is a Chainsaw. I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I think I had a good time, but I also had a hard time following a lot of the writing in it. But also, that kind of perfectly matches Stephen Graham Jones's style, so I guess it did what I come to expect from his work. That book was strange. However, Don't Fear the Reaper, I really liked. It was a fun ride. It was so great. It had a lot of the same things that the previous book did, but I felt like they were just handled in a better way. It was as though Graham Jones had kind of settled into that writing style a lot more. It felt much more well structured, and pacing of the book was a lot better. There is one scene in this that is going to live rent-free in my head forever. Still makes me a little nauseous when I think about it. I actually really liked the main characters in this one so much, and I think part of that is because you don't spend the entire book in one character's head like you do in the prior. This one you alternate around, and I had a lot more fun with that. I also really enjoyed so many of the horror movie moments that take place in this that you can see referenced. Plus, with this one, I actually loved the reveals and how they were done at the end of it. It was so crazy. I'm so thankful I ended up accidentally requesting this arc. On a very different note, I'm gonna have to say Silvia Moreno Garcia's The Beautiful Ones. I picked this up because Robin had given it really high praise, and I love SMG's stuff. Her writing just, it works perfectly for me. I love her characters. I love how she handles Morally Gray. Her atmosphere is phenomenal, and both of those things are fantastic in this book. It's like a fantasy historical romance. Somehow those three together worked really well for me, even though I usually would not say I'm a historical romance person, but I think the fantasy element made it so I liked it more. But I'm also not really a fantasy romance person, yet the historical side of it kind of shifted the normal dynamic I expect from fantasy romance. It was weird. My go-to description of at least the first part of the book is a fantastical Wuthering Heights. And yet I had a great time with this. It's definitely a soap opera, which again, not something I usually would say I enjoy, but like everything in this just worked so well together to be a very dramatic ride, but also had me so invested in some of the characters and seeing how they were going to grow and seeing how they changed. Valerie can still chill the hell out, but oh my god, this is a book that I shockingly think back on a lot. The romance was one of those where like at the start, I did not see myself enjoying it. There was no possible way I was gonna be wanting those two to end up together. And yet somehow by the end, I did. I'm still impressed. Can't believe that happened. Again, on a completely different note, also Sims Red by Martha Wells. I started the Murderbot series this year because I used to partake in this challenge that my library put on, and for 1 month it was to do a staff pick. And I was reading in June when I tried to read as many queer books as possible. But most of the queer books on the list I'd already read, and I didn't really particularly have interest in this series until my librarian insisted, no, it's actually a really fun time. There's a lot of casual queerness going on in it. Just try it. The audio is like 3 hours. Give it a shot. I'm so glad to her for doing that because I really ended up so in love with Murderbot's character. I've binged through most of the series throughout the year. Unfortunately, I did not get to the newest one in November. Future Nat will have to do that in January. While I still have some complaints about the series, I did not expect to love it as much as I did. Murderbot seemed so simple of an idea, and yet I care about that character so much. They're so fun, and I've loved seeing the growth they've gone through, seeing how they've somehow kind of become more human as the series progresses. I really enjoyed when it had some mystery elements going on in this like sci-fi world with, you know, an AI as the focus, who obviously doesn't want to be there. They'd rather be watching their shows. I really hope the next book kind of has a similar feel because that'd be perfect for me. That's also one of the books that has continued my sci-fi journey, and still in awe that I have read so many of that series so quickly. This next one you actually haven't really heard me talk about because the video I read it for has not come out yet. Cherish Farah by Bethany C. Morrow. I'd really only heard negative things about this. This was actually the lowest rated book on my Goodreads TBR when I picked it up. And yet, I think that worked out perfectly for me because my expectations were so low that I actually had a phenomenal time with this. The main character is, if not a psychopath, a sociopath, something along those lines. Seeing this story unfold and the unsettling feeling that slowly creeps up more and more as you go on, I do think that the mystery aspect of the story wasn't handled the best because it kind of got a little too obvious. Still, a great time with this. Really liked it. It was very unexpected to me. I definitely think this is like a really slow moving YA horror that had some interesting discussions going on in it. A lot of people didn't like this, but it worked really great for me. On a very opposite note, I have to talk about Honey and Spice by Balu Babalola. This was sold as fake dating romance, and that is why I didn't go in with high expectations, because fake dating and I don't usually get along. It's a trope that usually annoys the crap out of me, but in this one, the way it was handled, phenomenal. The character work in this also, just absolutely fantastic. I loved the growth, loved the development. I loved the focus on friendship. I really enjoyed seeing these two becoming better friends, and I loved seeing them take interest in what the other person cared about. The scene with Malachi absolutely nerding out about Kiki's favorite fantasy series, it's so freaking cute. Every time I think about it, I kind of tear up a little bit because it was so sweet. This was like a glowing 5 stars when I read it. I keep thinking back on it. I had such a phenomenal time. And again, a fake dating romance. That's so unusual for me, but then finally, another one that thankfully I went in with really low expectations and it worked out great for me. When No One Is Watching by 𝗖cie Ich𝘁�, I picked this one up for Spookopoly, and I'm so glad I did. I had heard a lot of people say that's not a thriller. It's a unsettling contemporary. It's a romance book that has some suspense going on. No, This is a thriller. There's actually horrific elements in this later on, I would argue. It was so good. It was so unsettling. Same as Cherish Fair. It was just creepy. And like the slow dread that would slide down my spine as I was reading this. Ugh, shiver-inducing. As I stated, the horrific ending, kind of the perfect sort of ending for me. And then the spice also, never gonna complain about that. I think the romance could have been developed a little bit more, but it was definitely fairly well done. I am still so intrigued to see more in this sort of a genre from 𝗖cie Ich. I want it. I want it bad. Another one. Went in with lower expectations and it worked out so perfect. This was so good. So freaking good. All right, and on that note, that is it for today, y'all. Unfortunately, I had a few more disappointments than positive surprises. Here's hoping next year that'll change. All right, y'all, so that is it for today. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me linked in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!